Good morning, friend. Welcome back to my kitchen. It is early. We are having some friends over for dinner tomorrow night, and today is prep day. Typically, when I have people over for dinner, I like to do as much prep the day before as I can. So that is my goal today. But before we can actually do any prep, we need to run out into the garden and grab some of the ingredients we need for this menu. We're gonna stop here first. Because we are in the height of harvest season right now, I tried to plan my menu solely based on what is in season and what I already have on hand. I did have to go to the store and pick up a couple things, but for the majority of it, we are working on our garden fresh produce and meat that I've already bought from local farmers. So the rhubarb is going to be for a rhubarb panna cotta that we're gonna make, and I'm really excited about it. This is not on the menu, but I can see it and it needs to be harvested, so I'm gonna go ahead and grab this zucchini. We'll just set that there for now. For our veggie side, we are going to have a delicious carrot salad. So we're gonna harvest some carrots. Beautiful. Oh, look at that. Look at that. That is a store-bought carrot size. One thing I've been doing for the past 2 years, this is my second year, is growing my carrots amongst my onions, and it seems to be working really well. So I think I'm going to keep doing that. But I think that's probably as many carrots as we need. Oh my goodness, look at that. As we need today. I need to fill that hole. See, look how big this onion is, even though I had a carrot growing right next to it. I walked by and saw this out of the corner of my eye. So that needs to be harvested. And for the main dish, we are going to have a beef Wellington. So we need some thyme. One of the next things we're going to be harvesting, but not right now, not till after I get a bunch of this prep done, is a ton of flowers for the centerpieces. But I want to get a lot of this prep done before we start thinking about the table decor. So here is our absolutely beautiful produce that we're going to be working with today. As I was washing the carrots, I was thinking we might need a potato dish as well. So we've got our dessert, which we're actually starting with right now. So our rhubarb panna cotta with cardamom. And then we have our main dish, which is our beef Wellington. And then we are going to do a carrot salad with a honey mustard dressing and a pickled red onion. And I was thinking we might need a potato as well. I am going to be making a French baguette. So we'll see if I end up making a potato dish. We'll just have to kind of see what this looks like and if I feel like we need another starch in our dinner. So we only have really 4 components to this dinner, but we have multiple recipes in each dish. So I've got all my recipes right here. We're just going to start working one by one and getting them prepped today so that tomorrow it's going to be stress-free and I can just hang out with my friends and not worry about the bulk of the cooking. When I'm having people over, what I like to do is try to think of menus and recipes that the majority of them can be prepped ahead of time. And a panna cotta is a perfect example of that. and you can make them any flavor you want. So in here we just have rhubarb sugar, about a 1/4 teaspoon of cardamom. I've never combined cardamom and rhubarb before, and I think that's gonna be delicious. And we're just gonna cook this down. I might need to add a couple tablespoons of water, but we're gonna see how much these rhubarbs release moisture, and we're just gonna cook this down until we have a nice sauce. I was gonna make a peach cheesecake for this dinner, but I have an idea of how I wanna make these panna cottas super cute, so I changed my mind. And that's the beauty of having your own party, is you get to decide the menu. Oh, it smells so good with this cardamom. Oh my goodness, that is gonna be delicious. So while that's cooking down, I wanna get going on our carrots. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna go ahead and shred our carrots right into our bowl, I think, or we'll see. So I am going to make kind of a variation of when we made our Greek dinner, but I'm gonna change the dressing. I'm gonna make the same style of carrot salad, just change up the flavor profiles to go better with tonight's dinner. So what I did last time is I just took my carrot peeler and I just peeled carrots. And I'm going to do this right here to as many of these carrots as I can. So it does get a little difficult to peel the carrots once it gets down to this part. So what I'm gonna do with these kind of leftover bits is I'm gonna freeze these, and when I make broth next time, I'm going to use this part of the carrot to make broth. So I can get my carrot peelings though right into the serving dish that I'm gonna serve this salad in tomorrow. This carrot has a little bit thicker of a skin, so I'm just gonna go ahead and just do a gentle peel to it. And then I'm gonna start peeling my shreds. I think just into here. I have all of my carrot peelings here, which are absolutely beautiful. And in the time it took for me to do that, our rhubarb is done. So what I wanna do is actually get this out of this pot, because I want this to cool down before we top our panna cotta with it. I just rinsed out our pot. So what we're gonna do in this same pot while this cools down is to make the panna cotta, which really is one of the most easy things to do. I'm using a recipe that I've never made before. I'm going to do one that actually calls for not just cream, but milk as well. The nice thing about panna cotta is you don't have to bake anything. Everything is just done right on the stove, and it makes it really easy. And so what we're gonna do is just gently heat our milk. We're not gonna boil this milk at all. We just wanna warm it enough to melt our gelatin. 1, 2, 3, 8. This is a 1/2 teaspoon, so I just put 4 teaspoons of gelatin in here. This is unflavored gelatin. And we're just gonna have this melt in this milk, along with a vanilla bean. So first thing I wanna do is get the seeds out of the vanilla bean and get these into our pot with the actual pot itself. I'm just gonna whisk that together just a little bit. Now we're gonna get our sugar into our milk to dissolve. So we're looking to dissolve the gelatin and to dissolve the sugar, but we're not looking to cook the milk at all. Panna cotta, creme brulee, cheesecakes are 3 of my favorite desserts to make for a big group of people, or even a small group of people, because they're perfectly easily made the day before. They feel really impressive, even though they're really, really easy. And they almost get better if they sit overnight. So while this is dissolving, I'm just measuring out my cream. And I am doubling this recipe. While this is still on the heat, I'm gonna go ahead and add some salt to balance the sweetness. Now we're gonna add our cream. All we're looking to do is to melt the gelatin and the sugar. So once that happens, this is done. That's how easy it is to make the panna cotta base. I'm gonna set my carrots aside for just a minute because we're gonna go ahead and just finish out our panna cotta. And we are going to serve these panna cottas in a wine glass. There is a restaurant that I've talked about in the past called Papa Haydn's that we used to go to when we were in high school for dessert. And they used to serve, or they probably still do, I just haven't been there in a long time, their panna cotta in a wine glass. And so I thought that's what I would do because it would make it just a little bit more festive. To make this easier to pour, I'm gonna pour our base into a pitcher that has a spout on it. And there are lots of recipes if you're dairy-free for dairy-free panna cotta, using coconut milk or just other milk alternatives. Normally, I would serve this in a ramekin, but again, I thought it would be fun to do something a little bit different. So I'm just going to take a second and wipe off any drips I may have made because I think it's going to be easier to wipe them off now before it sets. I didn't get too many because we used that pitcher with a spout. Now what I'm going to do is carefully, individually, grab each one of these one at a time and put them into the refrigerator to let them set. I should have made a place for them before I picked this one up. It didn't even take us 10 minutes to get this dessert done. So easy. I'm trying not to get the cream up the side of the cup. See, I missed a little spot here. Get that. And you can see the vanilla bean seeds in there. I'm excited to see what this turns out like using half milk, half cream, if it'll feel a little bit lighter than just full cream. I've only ever made panna cotta using just cream. So now we're moving along on our way. Let's go ahead and make the dressing for the salad so we can check the salad off of the things that we need to make today. So I'm gonna grab a couple other ingredients out because I know we're gonna need them to finish the salad. I want there to be a crunchy element to this salad and a chewy and sweet element to the salad. So we're gonna have some toasted pistachios in it. And so I'm just gonna get this kind of measured out and prepped and ready to go. And some cranberries. So that's our crunchy, our sweet, and our chewy. So we're gonna get the lid on this and we're gonna stick this in the corner here. So now we need to make our salad dressing for this salad. And I have homemade mustard and honey in this jar. It's just a homemade honey mustard. And I think that's about exactly what we're gonna need for this recipe. So I'm just gonna go ahead and make this dressing right in this jar. Now I'm gonna add some red wine vinegar, a high quality olive oil, one that tastes delicious. I'm gonna add some salt and some black pepper. I think we're gonna need a little bit more oil, but I'm gonna shake this up and see what we get with this first. And this is gonna be more dressing than we need for this salad. So whatever we don't end up using, I'll just pop in the fridge and I have some homemade salad dressing. I love honey mustard dressing on carrot salad. Oh, that smells so good. So now all I'm gonna do is taste this. That's perfect. That doesn't need any more honey. When I make my homemade honey mustard, it's usually about 1 part honey to 1 part mustard. And that's a homemade Dijon mustard I made that's pretty potent. So it can withstand that amount of honey. Now what we need to do is prep our homegrown red onions because we need a little bit more color in our salad. And I'm gonna marinate these onions overnight in our salad dressing. So all I'm gonna do is cut these onions really thinly. I think half of this red onion, because it's such a large onion, is going to be enough. So I'm going to take another prep container. I'm going to get our onions in here, kind of break them up a little bit. I want to season the onions with a little bit of salt. I'm just going to shake that salt around a little bit on them. And now I'm going to pour half of our dressing over the top of them. So that's probably about what we need for our salad. So we're going to be pickling and marinating our onions overnight. I'm going to get this in here. We're going to cover this, and now 2 of our recipes are done. All I'm going to need to do is dress this carrot salad tomorrow once my guests get here, and this is going to be pretty phenomenal. I'm going to pop this in my inside fridge, and then if I end up needing a little bit more dressing, I will pop that out and use it, but I don't think we're going to need to. These carrots have such amazing flavor. If you've never tried a homegrown carrot, they're probably one of my favorite things to grow because they are sweet and unlike a store-bought carrot. You can grow them in pots on patios. Before I had my own garden and we lived in a tiny suburban lot, I would grow carrots on my front porch patio in a recycled pot. They are delicious. So I'm going to pop this in the fridge, and this is done. I just unloaded my dishwasher so that as I am done with dishes, I can get them in here. I have said that before, but that makes a big difference on being able to not have an overwhelming mess on your hands when you're done. One of the main reasons this is clean, I haven't unloaded that yet. We're going to get going on the beef Wellington, and we need this in just a second. But one of the main reasons I like to prep a lot of the stuff the day before is because I can get a bunch of cleanup done the day before, and then I'm not worried about having to cook the food and clean the day before. So I worked too hard for these onions, or not onions, for these carrots to go to waste. So what I'm gonna do, these tops and bottoms and kind of the little bits of carrot that I could not shred, I'm gonna pop these into a freezer bag. This is a freezer bag that I've used a couple times this summer already with just fresh produce coming out of the garden. And I'm gonna pop these carrots in the freezer. And I'm gonna be making a big batch of broth here pretty shortly. And I'm gonna go ahead and use those trimmings in that broth. So what I'm gonna do with these few carrots that I harvested this morning that we didn't end up using in our salad is I'm going to cut these into spears, and this is gonna be part of our little munchie appetizer. We're just gonna have some cheese and crackers. It's not even gonna be like a huge charcuterie board or anything like that. Just a little munchie that I can have out that people can kind of munch on while we're waiting for the food to come out of the oven, because typically I don't like the food to be ready until after my guests get here. Now, I don't want it to be just going into the oven when they get here. I have some onion peel as well. I'm gonna go ahead and toss into this scrap bowl because I don't wanna pull a Michael Scott on them for a dinner party, but I do like to have a little bit of time where it's still cooking so that it can come out of the oven really hot. So sometimes that can be, a half an hour or so. So it's nice to have something that people can kind of munch on, and I don't feel like they're gonna be hungry. Okay, so I'm just gonna peel these. Ready for tomorrow. Now that we have got the dessert done and the side done, we're gonna get going on the main, which is going to be our beef Wellington. I have all my recipes on this new recipe stand that I got as a gift, And it's really nice having them standing up, and I can look at my schedule that I made, and I'm surprised by how quickly this is coming together, which is absolutely fantastic. So right now we're gonna get going. And if I haven't mentioned this already, I will link all these recipes that I'm following down below. We're gonna get going on the ultimate beef Wellington. And we need to make it's called a duxelle. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that's what we're gonna make, and we're gonna have that cooking on the stove while we make our homemade puff pastry. So I already grabbed out my food processor here, so I'm actually just gonna get this right on here, and we can make this right in our food processor. Now, I did wash these mushrooms. I washed them really well under running water. I know that some people say not to do that, and these mushrooms were pretty dirty, and because we're gonna be cooking them down, basically cooking all the moisture out of them, I'm okay that I wash them. I'd rather get them really nice and clean and just cook out any extra moisture that maybe they absorbed in that washing process. And I'm just gonna pulse these until they are very fine. The mushrooms were the only thing that I needed to buy produce-wise for this party. At my last house, I grew mushrooms, but I have not set that up here yet. So I need to get that going. So we're gonna bring this over here to the stove. I'm gonna get some oil in there, which I have not done yet, and a little bit of butter for flavor. We're gonna go ahead and just start cooking these down. The reason I'm cutting these in half is just so that they kind of pulse in the food processor a little bit better. Oh, I can hear it sizzling over there already. So while those are cooking down, I want to add some seasoning. The seasoning is really going to help, not the pepper per se, but the salt is going to help draw that moisture out and kind of help these cook down a little bit quicker. So we can use this same food processor to finish processing what we need next, which are shallots. And I happen to have some homegrown shallots. Now, these might be the world's smallest shallots, but they're better than nothing. So we're gonna go ahead and use these. And I'm gonna go ahead and slice all of them up because we need shallots for our red wine reduction sauce. So instead of having to process some now and then some later, I'm gonna go ahead and process these now. But I'm gonna also, I already washed this thyme. I'm gonna go throw some of this thyme in with the mushrooms so this can cook with the mushrooms. I'm just gonna put these sprigs in there. Kind of let that infuse in with the mushrooms while we work on the shallots. I also have some garlic here that I'm gonna go ahead and process as well. I just washed out the food processor, not because it needs to be perfect, because we're going to make the puff pastry that's actually going to wrap around this beef Wellington. So I just rinsed it out. So if it has onion flavor or mushroom flavor in it, that's totally fine. I just wanted to get any of the actual mushroom and onion bits out of here. I also washed out this pot that we used to make deserted. Woo! It's early, but it's not that early anymore, and I have had my first cup of coffee. So what I'm gonna do is prep the aromatics for the red wine reduction sauce. I'm not actually gonna make this sauce until tomorrow because I feel like I would worry it would separate. But what I can do today is get all the components done so that when people are here, they can hang around, eat some of the crackers and cheese and carrots that I'll have prepared, and we'll just hang out and talk while I finish this red wine sauce on the stove. So I'm gonna get all my aromatics into this pot. So that is garlic. I did end up Well, I just lost a clove. That's okay. I did end up peeling a few more cloves of garlic. The garlic that I grew this year, the variety in my garden, is super mild. The cloves are absolutely huge and big and easy to peel, which is fantastic, but they don't have a very strong garlic flavor. So that's why I do end up having to use, you know, a few of these really large heads of garlic just so that we get that flavor. So now I'm going to go ahead and mince up very finely a couple of these teeny tiny shallots, but I'm grateful to have them. I don't think I need all of these. I did go ahead and just peel all these shallots because they're so small. I figured it'd be worth just taking the time to doing it now. I think I'm just gonna throw the rest of them in the freezer and I'll use them later. These shallots in here. I have a lid for this pot, so I'll just pop the lid on this, pop this in the fridge. The only other few ingredients we need are the red wine and some beef broth, so I'll get those out tomorrow. And I'm gonna throw a couple sprigs of rosemary, thyme in there. And probably I'll add some butter, which we need butter for this. Let me go wash my hands real quick. So I have made puff pastry a couple times and I've made it a couple different ways. This one is a new recipe to me as well. If you do not want to go through the effort of making puff pastry, you can certainly pick up some at your local store if you want to. I'm just chopping off a few tablespoons of butter. I'm going to get this into our sauce, and now our sauce is well on its way. So what I'm going to do is grab my puff pastry, and I think we're going to need to double this recipe because my beef tenderloin is big, and this recipe does say that we need 1 pound of puff pastry. So I'm going to double it because I would rather not run out of pastry. Now let's see, we need 1 1/4. I think I'm going to make one batch at a time. I was curious on this puff pastry recipe, so that's why we're attempting this one, because the process was very interesting. So this recipe has all the same ingredients as a pie crust, but how the ingredients go together is kind of what makes it unique. So here we're going to start with our flour, and then we need to cube up 1 1/2 cups of butter. And again, it's okay that I'm using the same cutting board that I cut, or the knife that I cut garlic and onions on, because this is going to go into a savory application, so that's totally fine. And we are going to put in half of our butter into our food processor to start. This is salted butter with some salt. And then we are going to pulse this together for 15 seconds. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4. And now the butter is pretty fine in there. We're gonna add the rest of our butter, and we are going to do it for 4 pulses. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've got some bigger chunks of butter in there. Then we're gonna add our water. So it's pretty similar to just a crust recipe, but you add the butter in at different times. And we're just gonna mix that a couple times. There we go, call that good. Yep. I'll finish getting the water incorporated with the flour here on this piece of parchment paper. We're supposed to knead this 10 times. Basically just get this into a shape. Now I'm supposed to layer it. So if this works, that was easy. I'm gonna pop this in the fridge and I'm gonna make one more batch. I have made easy or rough puff pastries in the past, And this recipe definitely is easier than those because it uses the food processor as opposed to using a cheese grater. Grating butter by hand with a cheese grater is not my favorite thing to do. I'm willing to do it, but if I can do it in the food processor, I would prefer that. So it's kind of interesting how I'm just gonna grab my knife, add half of the butter or a little less than half the butter after you've worked in the butter more than I normally would for, say, a pie crust. So it's just kind of an interesting technique. I think what I'm gonna do is combine the two puff pastries, the one I already have in the fridge, so that I can just make one big one when I'm rolling it out and I'm not gonna have to seam it later. Our really large piece of puff pastry, this is going to go in the fridge. We'll roll it out really flat tomorrow and we will wrap our beef Wellington in it. I'm just going to take a quick little peek at our panna cottas. They are not near set yet. And I'm going to switch out, I'm going to grab our beef tenderloin and we're going to get that going next. But before we do that, I'm going to clean up all of this flour pastry mess. I'm taking a minute to really reset my kitchen. I've got my dishwasher loaded with the dishes we've used so far. I got my cutting boards and rolling pin washed. My mushroom mixture is almost done cooking. The next part that we have to prepare is the actual beef tenderloin. And when my kitchen is clean, I can think a lot better. That is a high stakes item in this, and I want to have my full attention on it, so I figured I would do myself a favor and do a quick little clean here. So this is now done. You can see that all the moisture has been cooked out of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the stove off here. So now we can get going on the tenderloin portion. So I have some twine here, a cutting board, and a pair of scissors, and probably I need a knife too. So what we need to do is prepare this tenderloin for searing. So you want to sear your tenderloin before you wrap it in the puff pastry, so you're getting that beautiful flavor that a sear offers. Now this is a tenderloin I got when I bought my half a cow. And the cool thing about when you buy your beef from local farmers is you pay per pound for the entire half. So you get a beef tenderloin when you order a half a cow, and you can either have it cut up into filet mignon steaks. It's the same cut of meat. It's just this is a roast form versus a steak form. Or you can have it in a T-bone. So a T-bone steak is where you've got a piece of filet mignon on one side, you have the T-bone, and then you have the New York on the other side. So because when I get my beef butchered, I like to make a beef Wellington, because this is a piece of meat I probably wouldn't buy at the store just because the price per pound is so high. So when I ask my butcher to butcher my half a beef, I ask him to keep the tenderloin whole, which means I don't get filet steaks and I don't get T-bone steaks, but I do request the New York steaks. And so I only get one of these per half a cow I order, and so I only make this when I have this. And I just ordered another half a cow, so I actually need to use this up because I'm going to be getting another one soon. So this is a pretty big piece of meat. And I want this to be an even piece of meat going into the puff pastry so that it cooks more evenly. So you can see that there's kind of a skinnier end on this end. So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm going to fold this skinny end on top and create a more even piece of meat. So what I'm gonna do, the reason I like to cut my twine off, all of my twine, is that way I can just work with it, and then if I don't use it all, I can toss it. And we are going to tie this up so that when we sear it, it stays in place. We're gonna remove this before we put it into the puff pastry. So now we're gonna season this piece of meat. I'm gonna put a little bit of oil on the steak, or roast. I guess technically this is a roast. I wanna season this really, really well. I'm using the oil as a glue, basically. And we're gonna pepper it. I'm gonna need to get some more salt. Salt it. While I get some more salt, I'm gonna go ahead and turn on my pan, and we're gonna sear this on the stove on a really high heat. Now we are not looking to cook our steak now. We are looking to sear it. So that's why I have it on such a high heat. And now what we're gonna do while that is going is I did clean my counter, but we are going to make basically the wrap that we're gonna wrap this steak in, or roast. We do need it to cool down a little bit before we wrap it, but we have now our mushroom mixture done. And what I can do while we're waiting for our steak to sear is grab out our prosciutto and start laying this out. My steak is done, so I'm gonna turn the stove off, and I'm gonna take my cooled down mushroom and I'm gonna lay it out on this prosciutto that I laid out on my counter. I did not do a perfect job getting this completely layered out here, but I did my best. So now I'm gonna take these little pieces of thyme out of my mushrooms. And I'm gonna go ahead and just take my steak or roast, and I'm gonna put it in the pan that I had the mushrooms in so that it stops the cooking process. And we need to lay this mushroom mixture out flatly. Wasn't exactly sure how big my roast was, so I may have put a little bit more ham out than I needed, but it was pretty fiddly, so I wanted to just get that out, and I would rather have it be too big than not big enough. So this mushroom mixture is basically room temperature at this point. You don't want to put hot mushrooms on the prosciutto. It's a big piece of mushroom. I'm gonna go ahead and take out of there. Our roast has cooled down a bit. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and remove the twine, because we don't want the twine in our final product. Now we're gonna take Dijon mustard. This just happens to be some homemade Dijon mustard, but use whatever your favorite Dijon mustard is. We're going to smear this on the whole thing. So this is the last food component we need to make today. So I'm going to finish cleaning up this kitchen, and then we're gonna start getting out a couple of things that we need for the table decor. We're gonna go harvest a bunch of flowers, and we are well on our way. This did not take me near as long today to do all this prep as I thought it was going to. So this is room temperature now, so we're gonna pop this in the fridge and we'll get this out tomorrow. So I don't want to roll this in pastry because I'm worried that if there's any moisture that's going to come out of this meat, I don't want it getting our pastry soggy. So we got the majority of the messy work done now. I will have to clean up after I roll out the pastry, but I'll worry about that tomorrow. Fred, I almost forgot one of the most important components of the dinner, at least for Josh, and that is the bread component. And that's only gonna take me a few minutes to put together. So I'm still gonna go with my plan that I'm gonna work on cleaning the kitchen first. We're gonna do a no-knead French baguette. And so that, all I'm gonna have to do is make the dough tonight and then shape it tomorrow. I've never made a baguette before, so we're doing lots of firsts today. I got the stove clean, I got the counter sanitized, I can put away my cutting boards. And the reason I realized I kind of forgot that I was gonna make the bread is I was gonna wait and do that until the very last thing, because that only needs to ferment or rise for 18 to 20 hours. And because we got started earlier in the day, I did not want to start that early. So I need to get some flowers. I need to fill that with flowers. I need to get flowers for the table. And it has felt like fall around here for the last week. It's been in the 70s. Today it's supposed to be in the mid 80s. Tomorrow it's supposed to be in the 90s. But we're eating dinner around 7, so I can't decide if we're gonna eat dinner here, where we have a little bit of construction happening because the painters are working on the weekends, so they have not finished this area, no big deal, or if we're gonna eat out here. Now, we can fit everybody at this table if we eat out here, which is fantastic. So what I think I'm gonna do is kind of track the sun because we're later in the year now. I think this umbrella will cover this table by the time we eat. And so what I'm gonna see is how does it feel tonight? And then I will make my decision if we're gonna eat outside or inside. So regardless of where we're gonna eat, there's gonna be the same amount of people, and I'm gonna use the same table decor. So I'm going to not use a tablecloth if we eat inside. I'm gonna use a lot of candles. So I'm gonna get some candle holders out. And I think, I thought I had ordered green napkins, but I did not. I really like these napkins. I got these for Valentine's Day last year, and I wanted to order the same ones in green so that I could use them for different table decor scapes. Let's see, we could do 2. No, let's do more kind of monochromatic this time. I want to try to go a little bit different look than we did last time. It's all different people that are here this time as opposed to last time, so they won't know if it looks the same. But I'm having fun kind of trying to reinvent the different items I already have to make it look a little different. So I'm gonna go for a monochromatic look. I thought I had enough of these tapered beeswax candles to use this. I got this last Christmas. I think that would be beautiful, but I only have 2 of them. I'm trying to start using beeswax candles more. I have 2 that are partly burned. I'm actually gonna put those in the living room and have those burning in there. But I can't have some beeswax in here and some not. You know what I have? I have the candles I bought at Christmas I could put in here. They're pretty tall. So what I might do is actually start burning these before people come, just so that they burn down just a little bit maybe. I don't know, we'll see. So my goal here is just to kind of get a rough idea of what I want to do for the table decor. And even though I do end up moving this dinner party outside, I set it up inside just to kind of get an idea. And I wasn't sure what the weather was going to be like. And so we were possibly going to eat inside if it was going to be too hot. But because the time of year it is kind of, we're getting a second wave of very warm during the day for the last few weeks, but what is happening, because it is now later in the year, is that the evenings are cool and beautiful. And so I am just kind of doing a mock-up inside, but I do end up bringing this outside because we want to try to enjoy eating outside as long as we can. Now, I am very slowly starting to build a collection of different table items to decorate the table and to make a fun tablescape. It is becoming one of my favorite parts of having people over, is creating a beautiful table. But I am trying to be definitely strategic when it comes to purchasing items for this purpose. I'm trying to find items that can cross many seasons and many events. And so one way I am doing that is kind of going with neutral items. Now, the red napkins I got for Valentine's Day, they are red, so they go for Valentine's Day, but because they don't have hearts on them, I can use them for Christmas, or I can use them for any time I want a red napkin. They don't just scream, Valentine's Day. And I don't end up needing to buy anything for this party because I just used what I already had, and I'm able to make a very, very unique tablescape just by mixing and matching what I already have. I do eventually want to get those green napkins that I thought I ordered because I think that would be fun. I like using green as a neutral item, and what I do for this tablescape is everything is pretty monochromatic. The only pops of color that I'm using for this table decor is some flowers that I harvested from my garden. Now, this is the first time I'm using cups. These are glasses that I had thrifted over the years, and normally I use mason jars to put my flowers in, but this time I thought it would be fun to use some cups that I normally use for drinking water as vases. So that was something new that I did for the first time this time. Now, I do have lots and lots and lots of flowers coming in from out of my garden, so I do end up making quite a few bouquets to scatter throughout my house. So this is some flowers for my entry. I am putting some flowers up here in this little nook in my kitchen, and then I do put a little bit of flowers in the powder bathroom. Now that the flowers have been taken care of and I've kind of got a good idea of what I'm going to do with the table, I am going to go ahead and put our rhubarb compote on top of our panna cotta so that the panna cotta doesn't get a skin on it in the refrigerator as it sits until the following evening when we enjoy this rhubarb cardamom panna cotta. I think this is absolutely delicious and will absolutely make some sort of version of this again. This is the first time I've ever paired cardamom with rhubarb, and they are definitely a match made in heaven. So I'm going to cover these and pop these back in the fridge. It feels good to have flowers back up there. That's my new favorite thing to put up there. And now we've got all of the things done I want to get done. Woo! Now we might end up, I'm just looking for the bread recipe. It's right here. I might end up moving us outside. We'll just see what the weather is like. So now we're gonna prep the very last ingredient for our dinner. And this is not going to take but a few seconds for it to come together. We're gonna start with 3 cups of water, 2 teaspoons of yeast, 6 cups of flour. I had to go get my bulk flour. And this is a no-knead recipe, so we can just mix everything together. That's 3. I'm gonna kind of fluff my flour up a little bit. 6, 2 teaspoons of yeast. Mix this together. We don't need to knead this, but we do want the flour and water to be incorporated. So I'm gonna get in with a wet hand. Just helps the flour and just helps the dough not quite stick so much. This dough is just gonna sit on this counter until we come back to it tomorrow. All the food has been prepped. The kitchen just needs a little tidy. Flowers have been picked, table is set, but we might be moving it. I'll just see what the weather's like. I do need to put together a little cheese tray, but I'm gonna call this basically done for the prep for today. I'll see you back tomorrow. Good morning. It is the next morning and we are going to turn this flour, salt, water, and yeast mixture that is very sticky into some homemade baguettes, which I have never done before. It always blows my mind whenever I try a new bread recipe, especially one that just has those 4 simple ingredients in it, how depending on the ratio of the flour, the water, the salt, the yeast, and how long you ferment it and how you shape it can really change what you're making. And so I wanted to really try to make something I had never made before on this day, and so baguettes just seemed like the next thing to make. So this dough is very, very sticky. So to kind of help that along, I am using some parchment paper with a little bit of flour on it, and I do wet my hands a few times throughout this process because wet hands with sticky dough actually help prevent the dough from sticking your hands better than flour does. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking half of our dough, I'm kind of flattening it out into kind of a rectangle shape as best as I can. Again, it's very, very sticky. And then I am rolling it up into what you would consider kind of a traditional baguette shape. Now, one of the reasons I had never made a baguette before is because traditionally you use this linen cloth to help support your baguettes as they rise. And I had never owned this cloth before, and so I did invest in this cloth. I can link it down below for you if you would like it, but I don't think you would have to have it to make this. I think after making this you could probably use just parchment paper and some different supports. You're going to see how I kind of support this dough. The reason you want to support the baguette dough is because it's so sticky, it can kind of want to flatten out on you a little bit, and you want to help support it so that it rises in a nice round shape. So that is what I'm doing here. So if you don't have this linen cloth, you could probably just use a cotton tea towel with some parchment paper or just parchment paper and just help support it. But I wanted to invest in it because I want to get more proficient at making baguettes. So now that my dough is rising, that's going to take a good 2 hours to rise. I am going to go ahead and go outside and give my dining table outside a good scrub, and this little coffee table that I have not washed them down in quite some time. And so because I know that we want to eat outside at this point, I wanted to get these scrubbed up and cleaned up early in the morning. The night before, I went outside around 6:30. The shade was covering this table and it was perfect and comfortable. And so that's how I made the decision that we were going to eat outside. Now, I do have 2 of these table runners. This is a pretty wide table. My outside table is quite a bit wider than my inside table. So I thought to add a little bit more volume to the table runner, because I have 2 of them, I would just layer them up on top of each other and it would add just a little bit more volume. I went ahead and I brought out the dishes and everything, and I got those outside. I grabbed some wine glasses and I put some votives on the table. I am not going to bring out the flowers until right before my guests come over outside because it is supposed to be in the 90s on this day, and I do not want the flowers outside all day. So I went ahead and I picked a couple tomatoes. Last minute, I decided that we needed another dish, and early on I was thinking maybe potatoes, but I wanted something a little bit lighter and fresher. My potatoes are going to last for a few months downstairs without anything happening to them. But what is absolutely stunning and beautiful coming in from the garden right now are the tomatoes. We are finally getting big, large slicing tomatoes. And so we are going to make a tomato salad to go along with tonight's dinner. So now that these baguettes have been rising for some time, I'm going to score them and I'm going to put them in the oven with some boiling water. And what that does is it helps kind of give you that beautiful crust. So the baguettes turned out perfectly. I'll show you what they look like when we slice into them. So I'm going to get those out of the oven, and now I'm going to shape my puff pastry. So I'm going to pull this puff pastry out of the oven. I'm going to roll it out kind of thin, but not too thin. This was tricky for me because I wanted it thin enough that it would cook all the way through in the time my beef would cook. I didn't want it too thick so that it would be doughy by the time my meat was done, but I also didn't want it too thin to where it was going to brown and be completely dried out, but I was still waiting for the beef to cook. So it took me a little bit of brain power to try to figure out what thickness I needed for this puff pastry, because a lot of the recipes I was reading about making beef Wellington called for store-bought puff pastry, and so I don't know, it just took me a bit to figure this out, but I think we got it. So I now have my puff pastry at the thickness I want and the size I want. I'm going to pop that back into the fridge, and then I am going to put together just my little cheese olive cracker board and with the carrots, and then I can deep clean my kitchen. And for most of this day, I just spent relaxing with my family. It is 5:17. My friends are going to be here at 6 o'clock, and I'm thinking we're going to eat dinner around 6:37. So I'm actually going to go ahead and get the oven preheated to 425, and we are going to start with the beef Wellington. We had a really relaxing day because I got most of this prep done yesterday. You did see earlier today that I did go ahead and I transferred the table setting outside because yesterday at this time, it was hotter yesterday, and by the time it was 6:30, that was all in the shade and it was perfect temperature. So I want to try to take advantage of the outside weather when we can. I've already gone through and lit all the candles inside, not outside yet. My friend's husband is going to be making some drinks for us tonight. So I grabbed out a couple different types of glasses. Actually, I went thrifting. Me and my friend, we like to go thrifting together, the one's coming over tonight, and I thrifted all these glasses with her. The bread turned out so beautiful. I cannot wait to try it and cut into it. I will let you know what it looks like and how it tastes when we do that. So I was saying earlier too that maybe I would make a potato dish as well. And then I was out picking tomatoes this morning and I thought, let's make a tomato dish instead of a potato dish. I know that caprese salad is one of my friend's favorites when we go out. She orders that a lot. So I have all the ingredients for that. I don't want to make that quite yet. I did have to go buy the burrata. I've never cooked with burrata before, so that's going to be kind of a fun and interesting thing to do. And I'm going to show you how we're going to throw that salad together really easily. One thing I did about 45 minutes ago is I actually took the beef Wellington out of the refrigerator so that it wouldn't be stone cold going into the oven. This is the part that's a little nerve-wracking, is making sure the internal temperature is correct and the puff pastry is cooked properly. And this is where my culinary skills are going to be put to the test, is if we can get this to be cooked properly. I'm sure it's going to taste delicious either way, but the goal is to have the internal temperature correct and the puff pastry cooked properly. Okay, I think what I want to do is actually smush this part down a little bit so it's not so thick where it is going to meet. Then I'm going to take a little bit of egg wash and just put it here on where the seam is going to be. And I've got almost 3 layers right here. So what I'm gonna do is cut out some of this excess. So now what I can do is fold that up underneath. I think I'm gonna cut a little extra off here too. Pinch the ends. So I'm just working to seal these seams together. So now I'm gonna egg wash the whole thing. I do need to put a couple little vent holes in the top as well. You can use your excess dough to decorate the top of your beef Wellington, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vent holes. An odd number always looks good on here. I'm gonna go get this taken care of. And now what I'm gonna do is pop this back in the fridge until my oven is preheated. I don't want the butter in my pastry warming up at all. And because I let the inside of that beef Wellington get a little bit more to room temperature, I'm not worried about the beef Wellington getting cold. I'm more worried about the butter warming up. The only reason I had this towel down was just to keep my countertop a little bit nicer because it is nice and clean and I wanna try to keep it that way. So I'm gonna wash my hands one more time and we are going to get going on making this tomato burrata salad. And I wanna go ahead and get out the snacks for people so they can have a little munchie while we're waiting for the beef Wellington to cook. So I got out a white serving dish because I want my tomatoes to kind of be the star of the show here. I'm not gonna salt them yet because I don't want them to start sweating or anything like that. I just wanna get this part of the dinner done and out of the way so I can kind of clean up my mess from it. And I think what I want, let's see. I'm trying to decide how I want to slice into these tomatoes to let them shine. I'm trying to make this random, which is always the hardest thing to do, is to make things random. Let's see. I'm just gonna put a couple cherry tomatoes on here, and this is going to be super, super easy. I will save all these bits of tomato that I'm not actually putting on the plate. Those are not gonna go to waste. I'll throw those in my refrigerator and I'll probably have them on my eggs in the morning or something like that. Nothing is gonna go to waste. I just kind of want to make this look as pretty as I can. Try to have these tomatoes shine as best as they can. So I'm gonna go pick some basil right before I serve this and top it with basil. And I'm gonna pop this into the fridge so that the cheese stays nice and cold. And I will pull this out of the fridge probably about 15 to 20 minutes before I serve because I really don't want the tomatoes really, really cold. But I do wanna keep the cheese cold. I just wanted to kind of get that cutting of the tomatoes and the cheese on here done because I can do the last part, which is going to be to top it with salt, pepper, balsamic vinegar, and olive oil. Going in the oven for about 45 to 50 minutes. Now, what I think I want to do, the recipe didn't say to do this, but I feel more comfortable doing this, is to top my puff pastry with a tent of foil so that it doesn't get too dark before the internal temperature is reached. So I'm looking for about 130 for this steak. Now I wish I had a meat thermometer that I could stick into it right now and tell me when it is done, but I don't have that. So in 40 minutes, I will take my meat thermometer and I will take its temperature. It's gonna need to rest for a good 20 minutes before we cut into it. And so it is now 5:45. So we're probably gonna eat a little bit later, but that's totally fine. I went ahead and set these 3 things out so that I remember to top my tomatoes with them. And now I'm gonna get my little snack tray out, which is very, very simple. And I'm just waiting for my friends to get here. So I will show you what this dinner looks like all pulled together. I do still need to put the flowers out on the table. I didn't want them out on the table all day because it's warm today. So I'll go ahead and put them out on the table right now. I cannot wait for you to see and hear the reaction of what this beef Wellington looks like after it came out of the oven. It took about 50 minutes to bake. I cooked it until the internal temperature was 140. I did check it pretty regularly toward the end because I did not want to overcook it. Once I took it out of the oven, I let it rest on the counter for a good 30 minutes. And while it was resting, my friends put together a little bouquet that they got to take home. And that was so fun. It was so fun watching my friends enjoy my garden. And then while we were outside, my friend's husband actually made the red wine reduction sauce. And once that was done, I went ahead and I put the dressing on the carrot salad, and Josh cut the bread for me. Now, we did decide to take the burrata off the tomatoes because I did not season the tomatoes yet, and I wanted the tomatoes to have a good amount of pepper and a good amount of flaky salt on them. And so I took the burrata off, I seasoned the tomatoes, I doused them in this beautiful balsamic that is my absolute favorite balsamic. It is not a balsamic glaze, but it's thick like a glaze and it's fantastic. And then I doused it again with some beautiful olive oil, and then I put my burrata back on the tomatoes, and then I kind of cut them open just a little bit, and I do end up seasoning the burrata with salt and pepper and a little bit of that olive oil and balsamic. Now here is me cutting into the beef Wellington. This is the stressful part. Did I cook it properly?
Oh, baby. That's perfect. That is perfectly cooked. That is perfectly cooked.
Oh man.
It's just, that is a perfect medium.
We did it.
That's perfect. Awesome.
Oh my gosh.
And there's so much of it.
Gorgeous. We did it.
What's happening? Where am I right now?
So that was me cooking that beef until it reached 140 and resting for a good 30 minutes. You don't want to cut into it too early because then all of the juices will just run out onto your cutting board. So you can see by letting it rest, we got a beautiful cut of beef Wellington. And then here are our 2 salads, which were fantastic. So delicious. And I'm really glad that I made this baguette. I will definitely make baguette more. I want to get more proficient at making the baguette. So we spent hours sitting at this table on a beautiful late summer evening, enjoying a great meal and absolutely great company. Happy Saturday. It is now the next day and the dinner party is basically put away. I finished clearing the decorations off the table this morning. Josh unloaded the dishwasher for me because last night we were able to load it with all of the dishes, start it. So this morning he unloaded it for me. He got some of the hand washing done so that I could go run to the farmer's market early this morning, grab this year's corn, and we are gonna be processing it now. So I just needed the dishwasher unloaded and loaded with all of my canning jars so that we can do a big preservation project today. So the dinner party went off without a hitch. Everything turned out so incredibly well. I am so glad I decided to make the rhubarb panna cotta because I didn't realize my friend's husband's favorite is rhubarb. And I'm so glad I decided to make the caprese salad because it was delicious, and I will be making that from now until I don't have any more tomatoes because it was so easy, so delicious. The vinegar, the salt, the oil, the tomatoes, and the cheese, perfect. The beef Wellington, I cannot believe how perfectly cooked that turned out. And my friends were able to both harvest a bouquet and take home with them. And I can't tell you how full my heart felt watching them enjoy the garden and to be able to pick their own flowers. And I told them they are welcome anytime. Just text me, let me know you're on your way, and you can pick a bouquet once a week if you want to, because I have enough flowers to share. And they both went home with carrots and zucchini. So friend, I just want to thank you for being with me as we pulled this dinner party together. It was so fun. It was the perfect evening, and I'm grateful that you were able to come along with me along the journey. If you want to watch some more videos, I can pop them here. You can go enjoy between now and my next upload. Bye, friend.